Okay. Welcome. Let's get started. Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Leibowitz. My pronouns are she, her. I serve as the current chair of the RAC Communications Subcommittee. On behalf of the subcommittee, welcome to the May 2021 RAND meeting. Just a few notes as we get started. We are recording the meeting. Participant video and mics are muted. Chat is disabled and live captioning is on. Please use the Q&A to submit questions. We acknowledge that U of M is located on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. In 1817, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi nations made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan, ceded through the Treaty of Fort Meigs, so that their children could be educated. We recognize the history of displacement of Native communities that facilitated the founding of U of M. We acknowledge the sovereignty of tribal lands, and we reaffirm contemporary and ancestral Anishinaabe ties to this land, as well as the profound contributions of Native Americans to this institution. Next. Today, we have a very full agenda and we will do our best to stay on time. We have presentations on effort, the NIH, BioSketch and other support changes, results from our DEI Europe survey, as well as updates from our central offices. Next. So we'd like to get started with a quick poll, getting a sense of our audience. So please tell us about your primary research administration roles and your effort-related activities. Select all that apply, and we'll give you a few moments to respond. And while you're responding, I'd like to give some community kudos to the 2021 UMore Staff Recognition Awardees, April Pepperdine, Becky O'Brien, David Paris, and Caleb Smith. To Sue Kelch for being honored with the Distinguished Service Award from NCURA, and to Judy Burke for receiving the AHARP Distinguished Site Visitor Award. Congratulations to all of you. You make U of M proud. We have a few more seconds on our polling. So, and hopefully we can see the results. So we have a lot of mix of pre and post award, a little dean's office, some central office, that's great. And people are very interested in effort monitoring and department budget earnings and personnel action requests. So thank you. Next. I am delighted to introduce today's MC, Heather Offhouse, Director of the Medical School Office of Grants, Services, and Analysis. Heather began her career at U of M as a front office clerk 25 years ago. She is keenly interested in forwarding the progress of research administration resources and tools. She participated heavily in the design of the campus ERA systems, is a member of RAC and RASC, and is quite active with NCURA. Next. Ooh. The slides disappeared. Heather lives in Fort Wayne, Indiana with her spouse, children, and dog Oliver, who is a COVID puppy. She is the longest running pilot for telecommuting, hitting 21 years this spring. She holds 2 degrees in music and donates her hair when it's long enough, and it's almost there. Heather's passion for effort will be apparent today. She helped develop the medical school's policy on effort and often presents nationally on the topic. She said she would go on for days if we let her, but promised to keep it within time. So Heather, over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. Hopefully I'm now sharing my screen instead. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. I do have really long hair now, thank you, COVID, and look forward to getting it cut next month. I think that's about when I'll have enough to donate. And I do like talking about effort. So hopefully what I've got to kind of introduce what we're going to talk about in effort certification will be helpful. And I guess send things in through the chat as we go, and we'll work through these slides together. So I have a bit on effort in a nutshell. And the first thing I just wanted to kind of level set with a couple of ideas before we turn over to the effort certification process. And that's thinking about effort is how someone spends their time. So keeping that in mind as we talk about things, when we talk about effort, we talk about percentages in effort all of the time, but underlying that, there has to be a mathematical calculation. We always need to talk about how many hours are in a week and what time that activity is taking to come out with an effort percentage. And I know that we often talk with, especially faculty, who may say, I proposed 10%, so I must be working 10% on the project. Hopefully that's true, but there is a lot in effort reviews that can be done to make sure that that is actually on track. So making sure we know how that effort is calculated, and keeping in mind that not everything is equal because different folks have different work weeks. So effort comes, oh yeah.
Your screen is sharing a Word document. Your slides are,
is that right?
not projecting. Yep.
Well, thank you for interrupting. So you've read all about Jim at this point. Hold on one second. That's coming up. I don't know why I did that. Okay, let's see if this is any better. Is this better?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So what I was saying is that effort comes in all different kinds of sizes. So we have folks at the university who have calendar year appointments, U-year or university year appointments. So it could be a 9-month appointment if you're in some of the academic units, or 10-month if you're in Dearborn. So those are going to vary. Summer appointments, if you have those at your school or college, also can vary even in a summer appointment. Some might only be a month and a half, some might be 2.5 months. So making sure that you keep in mind that not everything's the same. And when you think about that, not everything's equal, but you will each get a piece of pie, right? So everyone gets a pie that's worth 100% of their time. And so even if you have someone with a reduced appointment of 0.25, we still talk about all of them at the University of Michigan. So regardless of what they have, they've got the effort to distribute. So as we think through, as I mentioned before, we have this whole process of thinking about effort through the different stages. And when you think about it related to research administration, at the proposal stage, we're proposing, we offer what we're going to do as a commitment to that project. During the award, that becomes the actual obligation. So keeping in mind all the documentation that you have to go back to the proposal. The award document may have further information, or it may just say they accept our proposal, in which case the effort is as we proposed it. We're going to set up those commitments. We're going to hear about what we have at campus, which is a plan confirmation system. And so the commitment setup goes into our HR system. And then during the life of the project, we have commitments being fulfilled, we're being tracked, we're managing those on an ongoing basis because research projects are live. Nothing quite ever works exactly like we expect it to in research, so it's equally okay that we don't have effort that moves specifically through the project as we proposed it, because things can ebb and flow. And then at the end, we're going to make sure throughout the life, as well as the end of the project, we've got our documentation and report that we fulfilled our commitments. We do that on the financial side, the effort side, making sure that's in place. And I put up in the corner that this is a linear example. Nothing is ever quite this clean. This is the nice way to kind of think through the process. However, as soon as your investigator or your staff member you're working with has multiple projects that they're on, things could be, again, switching, going up and down throughout the life of the project and trading back and forth. And so while this is a nice way to have a good, clean introduction to effort, we know that it gets much more complex and complicated than that as you work through projects. So when we were talking about effort, one of the things is that the the RAN communications group put out a survey and asked, what are the things that are most important to you that you want to know about related to effort? What kinds of things keep you up at night? And of course, the number one thing that came back was compliance, understanding what the effort compliance issues are. So the RAN communication group graciously asked me to come visit, but also invited folks to talk about the effort certification process. And so I'm going to do a little bit of introduction for them, let them talk about their things, and we'll kind of roll it back to say, and how can a research administrator play a role in what they're talking about today? So as we think about effort certification, we're going to be joined by Cheryl, Jim, and Barb, and I'd like to ask them to start taking off theirs, but on their video. So Jim Metlock was named Director of University Payroll Office in 2013. In his current role, Jim's responsible for ensuring accuracy and compliance, which are two of my most favorite words, across payroll processing for all three campuses, with a focus on providing best-in-class customer service. Also great buzzwords to have best-in-class customer service. The key roles that he plays included working on the PeopleSoft implementation, conversion to the self-service time entry, and he has been involved with peer reviews at Penn State and the University of Iowa. So he brings a wealth of knowledge to us. He earned his MBA from Eastern Michigan and his Bachelor of Science from Central Michigan. We also have with us Cheryl Soper. She is the Controller and Director of Financial Operations. And last month marked Cheryl's 20th year serving in the university in this role. So congratulations, Cheryl. She's a graduate of the University of Michigan, a certified public accountant, and past chair of the National Association of College and University Business Officials, or NACUBO, the Accounting Principals Council. And actually, kudos out to you, Cheryl, because you recently received the Athena Award from the University of Michigan Alumni Council. And this award is given annually to recognize making a difference in professional and humanitarian endeavors. So congratulations, Cheryl. And we are also joined today by Barb Olson. She joined the payroll office in 2017 as a business systems analyst. And in her current role, she's responsible for administering the university's effort certification process, including compliance, efficiency, effectiveness, as well as overall process improvement. A woman of my own heart. She is the primary contact for inquiries from certifiers, department administrators, and key business partners. So keep her name handy as we start talking about the effort certification process. She serves as the payroll processing lead, and she earned her associate degree in legal secretarial from Cleary College in Ipsy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the three of you to talk us through effort certification, and then we'll join back in a minute.
And I'm going to share my screen. So thank you, Research Administrator Network Planning Committee and participants, for having us talk to you about effort certification today. I want to just commend you for meeting quarterly and such active participation. It looks like over 300 of you are online today. It's a really important role in the university, and thank you for all your efforts. So today, we're going to talk about the effort certification piece of the process. So Heather kind of outlined a little bit about the life cycle of the grant and how people are appointed, and the life cycle of the grant could be a multiple year grant. We're going to talk about how effort certification fits into that process. And it's an annual event or a bi-term event. So multi-year grant, it happens a couple times a year if you're a student, or one time a year if you're a faculty member. So we're going to give that background. Talk a little bit about process and timelines, hopefully spend a lot of time around best practices, both from our central office perspective, as well as we canvass many peers across the campus to see what they had to offer for best practices, and finally finish up with some resources and contacts. So first of all, we'll start off with just why do we do effort certification? Well, the answer is quite simple. Because we receive federal funds, we're required to do so. The federal government requires all colleges and universities that receive federal funding to maintain a system of internal controls that provides reasonable assurance that the charges to the federal awards are accurate, allowable, and properly allocated. And for you research administrators, it's the employees in your unit or the graduate students in your unit that allocate their effort to one or more sponsored projects or cost sharing on sponsored projects that must certify their effort. So what exactly, now that we know we have to certify effort, what exactly is effort certification? Well, we call it after the fact effort certification because when all employees are hired and appointed, their salaries are set to distribute to the different areas where they work. It could be just one chart com, or it could be multiple project grants in addition to research. They could have administrative responsibilities or department chair responsibilities. And so, as Heather was saying, throughout the year, things can change. How we thought we were going to spend the year might turn out to be totally different if we get new grants or a new job responsibility, or there's certain delays. And so the effort certification process happens at the conclusion of the year if you're an employee, or at the conclusion of a semester if you're a student. And it's confirming that how your salary distributed was appropriate and reasonable in relation to the total you that Heather articulated, whether you're a 25% FTE, a 50% FTE, or 100% FTE. How did you 100% spend your time during that period as you sit back and reflect at the end of a fiscal year as an employee, or at the end of the semester as a graduate student? So not all employees have to certify effort. Those that have to certify effort are if they either perform a sponsored activity or are compensated by cost sharing related to sponsored activities. And our effort certification is so efficient and so accurate that the health system also borrowed our effort certification process. And so a medical school faculty member who holds an MD, they're not doing research, but our effort certification system works so well that they've opted to borrow it because for Medicare requirements, they need to certify. So instead of having their own separate system, we let them borrow the effort certification system. So pictures are worth 1,000 words. And so this is a little table that I like quite a bit. So it just kind of shows in a nutshell who needs to certify, when the certifications are due, when the reports first become available that you can see what you can certify, and by type. So faculty and staff are annual certifiers, and it's real easy these days. It's just through employee self-service and Wolverine Access. The reports are actually available now, even though the fiscal year doesn't end until June 30th. But if someone's leaving this week, next month, in advance of the fiscal year end, it's convenient for them to go in and do the self-service now and certify. The ultimate due date is August 15th. For graduate students, it's easier to have them certify by term since they're not necessarily always here for a full fiscal year. So we send out their certification notices every term. Occasionally, someone needs to recertify because something might have changed when they originally certified, and so the recertification will happen the day after the DBE PAR is approved, and the administrator receives an email that says that certification is necessary to happen again. And if an employee is unable to certify electronically because they've inactivated their job status before certifying, we have an as-needed process that Barb's going to walk us through in a little bit. And then temporary employees and non-instructional sponsor pool, by virtue of them doing a biweekly time report, they're certifying real time. So I'm going to hand it over to Jim next, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how we do our outreach and monitoring to be proactive and best assist you.
Okay, thanks, Cheryl. And again, thanks to all of you for allowing us to present today. This next slide documents the proactive communication process we have in place to help ensure we get as close as possible to our overall goal of 100% compliance. So first, Cheryl sends an email 6 weeks prior to the certification due date to both the employee who needs to certify as well as to their HR administrator. And then Barb Olson from the payroll office will follow up with a reminder email 2 weeks prior to the due date to those who haven't yet certified. And again, that reminder goes to both the certifier as well as their HR administrator. After the due date, Barb has an escalation process for the email reminders, with the first one again going to the certifier and the HR admin, and then it escalates up to the BAG member, and then finally to the HR administrator within the dean's office. And although our overall goal is 100% compliance, we do stop sending reminders once the university as a whole is at 95% compliance. Next slide. Okay, so with this next slide, we're talking about how to adjust effort percentages. So when it becomes time to certify, and if the certifier doesn't feel their report is accurate, a DBE or a department budget earnings update will need to be processed by the unit administrator, assuming the effort is off by 5% or greater over the certification period. And as Cheryl mentioned, that certification period could be fiscal year, for our faculty members, for example, or on a per term basis for our graduate students. And if the difference is less than 5%, we don't consider that to be material, and a DBE update is not necessary. Now, let's assume a DBE update is needed due to a grant being awarded retroactively. An effort was previously certified by the employee. For this situation, once the PAR transaction is approved for the DBE update, it will automatically generate an email to the department administrator so they can notify their employee to recertify via employee self-service. Next slide. Okay, so the next couple of slides reference the as-needed effort certification reports, which is a paper-based process that is used versus certifying one's effort online via employee self-service. At this time, I'm going to have Barb Olson review this process with all of you. As mentioned earlier, Barb is a business systems analyst in the payroll office, and she is our primary contact person regarding the effort certification process as a whole, including the as-needed process. So at this time, I will turn it over to Barb.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim, and good afternoon to everyone. And now on to the slide concerning the as-needed effort certification report. This report is required if an employee is non-active or has an inactive status on job data. An as-needed effort certification report is used to certify or recertify their effort. Non-active or inactive status includes terminated, reduction in force, or leave of absence. To generate an as-needed effort certification report, the HR administrator accesses mPathways HCM, which is Human Resource Management System, via Wolverine Access located under University Business. The as-needed report requires a manual signature by the certifier. If an alternate signature is necessary, prior approval is required from the payroll office. Send your request via email to effort.reporting.payroll@umich.edu. The request will be reviewed, and then if authorization is granted, you'll receive a permission granted email back to the HR administrator to go ahead and get the alternate signature. The alternate signer must have direct knowledge of the work performed by the certifier. Okay, there are possible future IT enhancements that are in the works to include the enabling of online as-needed effort certification for terminated or inactive employees. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. In preparing an as-needed effort certification report, be sure to use the correct start and end dates. For graduate students, the start date is the first day of the term for which the student is certifying. For example, January 1st, May 1st, or September 1st. And the end date is the last day of the term or the last day worked, which is ever later. And just a side note, that due to the change in the academic year starting in August, a spring summer as needed report for the August dates, as well as a second report for the remainder of the fall term, must be generated. Both reports need to be certified in order to completely certify fall effort. And then for regular employees, the start date is the first day of the fiscal year for which the employee is certifying, which is usually July 1st. And the end date is the last day of the fiscal year or last day worked, which is ever later. And another side note, if using earlier or later termination dates or dates that include more than one certification period causes the printed report to not match the data that is currently in the effort certification system. And therefore, payroll cannot proxy certify for the employee. When an employee transfers from one unit to another, it is not necessary to process an as-needed report since the employee is still active. They will be able to certify at the appropriate time. When a terminating employee's effort is split between two departments, the report needs to be run for the individual as a whole and signed by the alternate signers from both departments or by the employee if applicable or if available. Okay, that's the end of mine. So in the next slide, Jim Metlock will highlight some of the best practices used in our units for meeting effort certification compliance requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Barb. So to keep us on time, I will be going over these next several slides fairly quickly. So we know that our HR administrator colleagues are a good source of helpful tips to ensure timely effort certification. And so this slide reflects some of those tips. And one of the biggest recommendations is to run what's called the effort certification status report on a regular basis, because this report will show those who have certified in your department as well as those who still need to certify. And it can be run by org group code, admin or appointing department ID, as well as at the EMPL ID level. In addition, a lot of units establish their own escalation process for sending reminders to certifiers and or the effort certification managers, which helps ensure timely certifications within their units. Next slide. A couple more tips include setting up a filter for those automated recertification emails so that they are forwarded to the appropriate individuals responsible for notifying the employees on who needs to recertify. And then, and a very important tip is that when you're processing the termination PAR for those leaving the universities, please check if an effort certification is required and ask the individual to certify before leaving. Next slide. Okay, so now we're on to best practices. So we know that unit administrators are an important part of the internal controls process for effort reporting. And this slide reflects many of the things they can do throughout the year to help make the effort certification process easier. First is processing timely appointment and DBE changes, which will result in fewer recertifications that are needed. Another best practice is working with other units when joint appointments exist. And we've also found that when faculty talk to their administrators about effort reporting a couple times a year, they find it easier to certify. And if they think it's easier, then it will also be easier for you as the administrator. Ultimately, it's the employee's responsibility to ensure that payroll distribution reasonably reflects effort distributed over the report period. So to facilitate the review, we recommend that employees periodically view what's called the Preview Effort Certification Report, and that report is available in Wolverine Access under Employee Business. And then finally, as I just mentioned, it's important to include a review of the certification status for employees who are terminating from the university. And was there anything, Cheryl, that you wanted to add to this?
I think just to continue to emphasize, the conversation throughout the year is very helpful so that the DBE changes and appointment changes can be done real time instead of at the end of the year when they're about to certify and they're like, oh no, it doesn't match. So to be proactive and have those conversations and work closely with the HR administrator in the unit is really helpful. And in terms of tips and tricks, the auditors really do spend time looking at the percentage of effort certification that's completed. Both our external auditors from PricewaterhouseCoopers as well as the federal auditors nationally. And recently, Scripps Howard had to pay a $10 million fine to settle claims that it improperly charged NIH-funded research grants for time spent by researchers on non-grant related activities. And in addition, the University of North Texas Health Science Center paid a $13 million claim in the past couple of years for similar reasons, that it inaccurately measured, tracked, and paid researchers for efforts spent on certain NIH-sponsored research grants inappropriately. So it is an important item. And with that, we'll switch to our next slide with some other helpful resources that Jim will walk you through.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. So again, if you'd like more information about effort certification, I encourage you to read U of M's policy on effort certification, and that's SPG 501.10. And then information about salary transfers that result from the retroactive DBE changes, that information can be found in SPG 501.09. And then if you just want more detailed information and procedures about effort reporting and certification, you can visit that financial operations website that's listed on the top of this page. Next slide. So there's a lot of resources to assist you, so please don't hesitate to contact us. As I mentioned earlier, Barb Olson is the primary payroll contact, and her supervisor, Lisa Engel, is also listed on this slide. Or if you want, you can just send your questions to our general effort reporting email group that you see at the bottom of the slide. And then in addition, the ITS Help Desk can assist with any system access questions or technical issues about the online certification tool itself. Slide. Okay, so at this time, I would like to turn it over to Heather for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl and Jim and Barb. That was really great for you to come in. There is a question in the chat that if we maybe could chat out to the group. It says, where can we find the effort certification report in Wolverine Access? So if that's something we could answer or put in the text chat to share with the group attending, that would be great. And then there's a very specific question about someone with a 1.0 FT not accepting a sub-K, and I'm going to take that offline for just a minute, but know that we've seen that question as well as the E-Verify question. Were there any other questions coming in for the group? And I'm going to share my slides again, and hopefully this time I don't share the wrong screen. So I'm going to do a check right away. Does that look like a PowerPoint slide to anyone, or a Word doc? I've got a yes from Cheryl.
PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Cheryl and Jim and Barb, thank you for being here, and please stick around as the questions probably will continue to roll in. So we'll come back to that maybe toward the end. So as we talk about research administrators, what can we do to help support the effort certification process? I know that not everyone is completely directly involved with the certification process, and you may have HR partners that are doing that work, but there are things that you can do as a research administrator. Making sure you have a really great understanding of what was in a proposal, what was in the award terms, what the sponsor's expectations are. That can really go a long way to helping have that conversation with faculty and staff who are in the certification process so that they understand what's expected. Making sure throughout the year, as Cheryl mentioned and Jim reinforced, that the timely effort requests for changes in the HR system are being made, and then doing early and often reviews. So I know Cheryl mentioned that for campus, it's a 5% threshold and they suggested ongoing reviews of effort throughout the year. I will tell you, for the medical school, we have a more restrictive policy. So if you're from the medical school, you should know that we actually have a 3% threshold, and we say in our policy you should be doing quarterly effort reviews with all who will need to certify. So depending on your school and college, you might want to look into whether there is another sort of layer of policy that you should be aware of to make sure that you're following your local. But campus is 5% changes. So as we go ahead, I know that there are more questions popping in, but we'll take a look at those during the next presentation to see how we can follow up on those. So just a quick reminder that effort is how your time is spent, not how you're paid. So when you think about it, I've got 3 quick pieces of pie for you to take a look at and kind of absorb. When you think about effort, if the time being devoted to a project is greater than, and that's that first example at the top, greater than what we're telling the sponsor, you do have a little bit of pie for that effort on that work that's institutionally supported. That's okay. You can have that kind of balance. We're not in an audit issue at all at that point. The second example, sometimes, I think the sweet spot where most people try to be is that where the effort spent on a project is equal to the dollars being charged, that representation of the effort, when they're both in line. We like that both as units so that we're not sort of supporting things a sponsor could support and we're not in a compliance issue. But when you get below that red line, anytime you know that the effort being performed is being charged to a grant at a greater rate than the effort being performed on the work. And you can see at the bottom of the picture, sort of this red line going to this empty space. If we're charging for all of this time, but only spending some of the time, that's where we get into the fancy word called fraud. So we don't want the institution to be in that place. So having conversations to make sure effort and pay are lined up are very important, but we are certifying on a percent effort system. So I do have a very quick case study for you. You can read it online, and it refers to the pie in the bottom corner. So if we look at Professor Good, who's successful, her latest NIH grant got funded, which is always what starts driving some of these issues. But there's no departmental research time available to do the work. How do you advise she fit in an NIH project along with an NSF, a NASA project, some teaching time, writing grants, doing administration? And if you want to kick some ideas into the chat, that would be great before I show you a possible solution and we move to our next topic. Thank you for starting to answer. I'll share. Here's a possible solution, and some of you have sent in some ideas like this. A possible solution could be, as you add that new NIH effort time, to potentially leave teaching the same, maybe decrease writing grants. Now that they have an NIH, a NASA, and an NSF project, you could see a reduction in the grant writing time, maybe some reduction in the administrative time. And over here on the right, 2 things to keep in mind. Changes to other sponsored projects should trigger your spidey sense. You probably want to start looking at what the rules are. So for instance, in NASA, if you look between the 2 slides, NASA was a bit bigger piece and now it's a bit thinner piece. That may not be able to happen unless you have a conversation with NASA. So knowing your sponsor rules and regulations are extremely important in order to balance things. And do keep in mind this last bullet, that every single activity has to show up within the pie of 100%. You don't want them to say, well, I'll just write my grants on the weekend. There are no such things as nights and weekends. It's all institutional time. They may be expanding their work week and changing their percentages, but they can't say, I'll just do it on the weekend or at night. So every activity should be showing up in their pie and their effort distribution in order for us to be compliant. So with that, I leave you with a great quote when they tell you they're going to do it on the weekend, or they don't have time to do everything, when you're talking about effort. So everyone has the same amount of time. So with that, we're going to close off a bit of effort, I want to acknowledge the fact we have not talked about many things related to effort. Our time is limited during the RAND meeting, and we'll come back at the end to talk about some things, but I do know, like with E-Verify, salary calculations that came in, any of those sorts of things that we need to talk about, we may want to see what we do with effort in a kind of a longer educational opportunity than the RAND meeting. So we'll move on from there. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And at this point, I'm going to turn over the time to Craig Reynolds. Craig is the Assistant Vice President for Research and Executive Director of the Office of Research and Sponsored Projects, ORSP. And he's going to come in today and talk about some things that kind of relate in the effort world, because NIH is making some brand new wants and asks of us. So, Craig?
Hello, everybody. Good to see you. And not really, I can't see any of you, but good to imagine that I'm seeing you. Do we have the slides up? Here we go, Chris. Thank you. So I have 10 minutes to give you an update on the NIH changes to the BioSketch and other support requirements. Next slide. I'm going to start off by just stating what I hope is obvious to a lot of folks who've been paying attention, that things are a muddled mess right now, and not of our own doing, but we have two separate notices that came out from NIH with respect to BioSketches and other support. There's an FAQ, there's a newsletter, and NIH officials have made public statements, directed emails to individuals who have asked specific questions, made comments in closed meetings, and none of them are consistent. So we're trying to make sense out of incomplete information and conflicting information. And so what I'm going to share with you today is our best attempt to make sense of that. That's gumbo. It may change, it likely will change as we get further clarification from NIH. And so what I'm gonna very quickly go over the changes, but before I do, I'm gonna ask Chris if he could post a document that I ginned up a couple days ago, which is a very high level summary of the changes that we know of from NIH on both BioSketch and the other support documents. And when you see it, it's a one-page cheat sheet which says these are the major changes. These are the changes that are due, implemented on May 25th. And then these are the changes that have been delayed until January 25th of 2022. So I'm hopeful that this will be a handy guide for everyone to use and refer to as we gain more clarification from NIH. So next slide on the BioSketch changes. The main thing to know here is that all of the changes that were announced previously have been delayed until January of next year, by and large. Until January 25th, you can use the old BioSketch format or the new BioSketch format or the Science CV tool that is used to generate the BioSketch. After January 25th, you can either use the new BioSketch format, for which there are templates available, or use Science CV to produce the BioSketch, but we can't use the old BioSketch format after January 25th. And if you do, NIH may withdraw the application from consideration. Next slide. Some of the major changes: there are separate forms for instructions for fellowships and non-fellowships. Regardless of the form, follow the guidance like all good research administrators do and provide the information that's requested. Next slide. Section B on positions and honors has been renamed to include scientific appointments. And that's intended to capture appointments outside of the traditional academic titled appointments that you might think of, like your assistant professor titles. What they're trying to get at NIH is any appointment that our faculty have had, whether they're paid or not, whether it's full-time, part-time, or voluntary. So adjunct appointments, visiting and honorary professorships, that all needs to be included and in reverse chronological order. Next slide. Section D on research support has been removed, and actually it's been moved over into the other support document. But in the upside is that now there's an opportunity to highlight in the personal statement the research projects that within the last 3 years that faculty would like to make sure the reviewers are aware of. Next slide. So that was simple. Other support gets a lot more complicated. But again, we've got this transitional period between now and January 25th. And you can use either an old form for other support or a new form for other support. The reporting requirements haven't changed essentially in terms of what is required to be included on the other support, but we've got two different formats. NIH is releasing a science CV utility later this fall that will be available to generate other support, which you can use. It's not required, but we definitely need to use the other support format after January 25th. And again, non-compliance could get you booted. The new version of the form has both a section for in-kind support and project or proposal support. So both your traditional other support plus in-kind support. And an easy way to think of in-kind support and where to include it is if you have an in-kind resource that the faculty member has access to but isn't using on the project, it goes in other support. If a resource is used on the project but not charged to the project, then it goes in facilities and resources. And if it's an in-kind item that needs to be budgeted to the project, of course, it goes into the budget. Next slide. So in the new form, there's a requirement for other support or completed support for the last 3 years. Outside activities must be reported as other support. And if the faculty member is conducting research as part of that outside activity, we haven't really gotten a clear definition on what consulting means. But if an investigator is likely to end up as a co-author, then it's likely that they're doing research. Gifts do not count as other support unless the donor expects something in return. So most donors expect something. Next slide. Effective January 25th, there will be a requirement to provide supporting documentation, which is essentially a copy of any agreements that our investigators may have that constitute an employment or appointment relationship with a foreign entity, and it's a source of other support. So this is an outside activity. Faculty have an appointment with another university, another company, and a foreign entity. We have to provide a copy of that agreement that governs the appointment. If it's not in English, we have to provide a translated copy, although machine translations are acceptable. Next slide. These if these agreements have confidential information, that can be redacted from the agreement, but NIH wants to know key vital statistics about that agreement, like the duration, the amount, the entity with whom the faculty member has engaged in the outside activity. We're still trying to work out what our internal processes will be for review of these contracts. So there's more to come on that front. And in spite of the fact that this supporting documentation must be provided effective January 25th, if NIH asks us in advance of that date for supporting documentation, we must provide it if it's necessary. And I think this is getting near the end. But each investigator who has another support document must electronically sign a PDF of that other support documentation. Again, this is in January. And if it's signed, the PDF must be flattened prior to submission. So a little technical item there. So that's what I have. Like, again, I hope that the cheat sheet will be helpful to you. Of course, we're always available for questions and answers in ORSP. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to Chris, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Craig, and hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome to the screen the virtual stage here, Zena Rita, who is the Europe student who helped with the RAC DEI work group. So Zena is a rising third-year undergraduate student at U of M. She is studying political science. She served as a UROP, which is the Undergraduate Research Opportunity Program research assistant with the RAC DEI work group this academic term. And she was really instrumental in helping to support our efforts to develop a diverse and inclusive research environment at U of M. And she's here to present the results of her study. And having worked very closely with Zena on this, I can say that I'm thoroughly impressed by the work that she did, having virtually no experience doing survey research when she came into this. So Zena, I'll turn it over to you, and just let me share my screen real quick so I can get into your slides. So I'll turn it over to you, Zena.
Thank you so much, Chris. Hi, everyone. My name is Zena Rida, and today I will be presenting about my research titled Research Administration Advisory Council, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Workgroup Research Support. So some of you may know at U of M, there's a large racial demographic disparity among research administrators. Data collected in 2020, as depicted on the left, shows that 84% of research administrators identify as white. And so with the university's DEI initiatives permeating academic spaces, there is a need to evaluate DEI consciousness among our research administration community. This past academic year, I had the opportunity to work with Chris to develop a survey that assesses two main research aims. The first being assessing the awareness and needs of research administrators in terms of diversity and inclusion in their individual workspaces, and the second aim being assessing the effectiveness of the university's DEI efforts at an institutional level. Ultimately, the purpose of this study is to further inform how the RAC DEI workgroup can promote its mission to develop, foster, and guide a diverse and inclusive research environment at the University of Michigan. So this online anonymous survey was created and distributed among research administrators at U of M through Google Forms. The survey consisted of multiple choice, 5-point Likert scale, and open-ended questions on 4 main areas of focus: personal demographics, assessing workplace diversity and experiences, evaluating the institution, and next steps. So now I'm going to be presenting some of the results from the questions posed in the survey. The first few slides will go through questions in the personal demographics portion of the study. The first question asked respondents to indicate what race they identify with. From a sample of 150 responses, we saw similar demographic distributions to the data from 2020, where here we had nearly 83% of respondents identify as white. We also had 20, or roughly 13.5 respondents identify with a minority identity. Because there was such a small sample of race minority respondents, it made it harder to evaluate the data in terms of specific demographics like MENA or Asian, without potentially risking confidentiality of responses. So throughout the rest of the presentation, I will refer to these 20 respondents as the race minority response. One of the next questions in this section asked respondents to indicate their age. The largest age group in our responses came from those between the ages of 50 and 59. The minority age groups consisted of individuals older than 60 years or somewhere between 25 and 29 years of age. We had 0 respondents between the ages of 18 and 24. So next I'll be sharing some results from the Assessing Workplace Diversity and Experiences section of the survey. In this section, one question we asked on a 5-point Likert scale was, "My work environment is diverse in its composition." The results from the statement were quite fascinating. We had an exact bell curve shaped response, indicating that the greatest percentage of respondents neither agreed nor disagreed with the statement. And when looking at this question in terms of the race minority, we had 65% of responses show some form of disagreement or neutral opinion. The next question asks respondents to indicate from a scale of strongly agree to strongly disagree their thoughts on this statement. I have access to spaces where I can discuss anti-racism and learn how to combat discrimination and prejudice. Here we can see that a majority of respondents from both total responses and the race minority responses show more agreement than disagreement with this statement. The last section we will be evaluating in this section, the last question we'll be evaluating in this section stated, I often worry about not having things in common with others in my work group. Results from the total 151 responses indicate that a significant majority of respondents show some form of disagreement with this statement. And when looking at the race minority responses, you also see the same trend where 55% of race minorities disagree with the statement above. I personally was not expecting this response when I analyzed the results, so I thought maybe this distribution would look different if I analyzed the age minority response to the question. So I gathered the results of anyone who identified as 60 years of age or older, or between the ages of 25 and 29, and found that these responses did look a little more different than the other two samples. Here we have the greatest number of individuals indicating that they agree with the statement, meaning that they do often worry about not having things in common with others in their work group. So clearly, in addition to race, there are other factors we should consider when looking at commonality in work groups, such as age, gender, and ability. The third section was titled Evaluating the Institution, and here I'll go through responses from 3 different questions we posed. The first question we asked on a 5-point Likert scale was, I believe the University of Michigan provides sufficient resources and information about DEI in the workplace. This statement resulted in a majority of respondents showing some form of agreement with the statement, and we had 0 respondents who strongly disagreed with the statement. However, upon being presented with the statement, I believe the University of Michigan acknowledges and is responsive to policy violations, we see a majority of respondents showing some form of disagreement or neutral opinion. The next question posed was an open-ended question, asking respondents to elaborate on their reasoning behind the evaluations for the previous questions. So on the slide here are 6 of the 101 responses we received. One of them reads, I think there are so many microaggressions that do not rise to the level of being acknowledged as policy violations. Another person said the U of M seems to only value ethnic, cultural, racial, and gender diversity, whereas diversity of thought is suppressed. And someone else stated the university provides opportunities for employees. However, there should be more mandatory efforts of participation. It seems as though those who want to change go to diversity training and those who need it the most do not go. So these themes covered in these 6 reasonings were common among the rest of the 101 responses. Now the last section in the survey was titled Next Steps. On the next slide, one question we asked was for respondents to indicate which topics they're most interested in learning more about. From the 7 options we listed, which were bystander intervention, unconscious bias, anti-racism, facilitating DEI conversations, allyship, sexual harassment in the workplace, and gender identity, the topic respondents were most interested in learning about was bystander intervention. We also left this question open for additional responses, and we had others indicate that they would like to learn more about learning disabilities and barriers, trauma-informed communication, and how to help victims feel safe to come forward. The last question we will cover for today asked respondents to share anything we did not ask for that they would like to mention. So I'm going to read a few of those responses. One person said, there is great work being done to highlight racism, gender/LGBTQ+ issues, women issues, etc., but disability rights are still being hidden/ignored. Another person said, I feel there is too much political divide. Liberal and conservative folks alike should be heard and respected. And lastly, another respondent said, U of M needs to encourage rather than discourage free speech. The current environment is intolerant of diverse viewpoints. So to conclude, some of the common themes among responses from the research administrators were mandatory training. Those who need it the most typically avoid participation. a need for diversity of thought, understanding how to engage in civil conversations and respecting different viewpoints. Acceptance versus tolerance. There's a need for acceptance from our colleagues for our diversity as opposed to tolerance of our diversity. Accountability, holding both leaders and non-leaders to the same policy violations and performance expectations. And lastly, cohorts across schools and colleges, getting out of working in silos and starting to learn by working together. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for taking the time to listen to this presentation. I hope you found this study to be informative and that it has allowed you to become more aware of some of the concerns your fellow research administrators have. I'm going to be sending a document in the chat that includes an analysis of all the questions that were in the survey, so feel free to take a look at that document if you're interested. Once again, thank you so much for having me today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Andrea Anderson for some ORSP updates.
Thanks, Senna. That was really, really great. I appreciate all the work you have put into that. That was really well thought out. So thank you for sharing that with the group. Okay, so ORSP updates. Chris, are you gonna? Yeah, great, thank you. Perfect. So I just wanted to kick it off with a quick reminder of best practices for communicating with ORSP while we are still remote. I know that it is an ongoing struggle sometimes to figure out how to reach people, especially when there aren't phones at our desks or people at our desks where our phones are. So good tip, checking locally first, seeing if you can find the answer within your unit or college. Don't forget to check agency guidelines and FAQ. Requesting ORSP action is still the preferred method and the fastest way to get a response because it will go into our work queue in ERPM. Our phones are not currently forwarded, but if you leave us a voicemail at our desk phone, it will be transcribed into an email and we will receive it that way. Just make sure to let us know if it's time sensitive, what the consequences will be for being untimely. And as always, please include the identifier from ERPM and the PI's name in your message. Next slide. A few agency updates first. So NIH recently expanded the requirement for ERA Commons IDs to include all senior key personnel in the application. That was published recently in a notice and will be effective January 25th, 2022, and that applies to NIH, HRQ, FDA, and the VA Office of Research and Development. Next slide, thank you. NIH has updated their grants policy statement that was published last month with a summary of significant changes. So I would encourage you to go out and check it out. Most of those significant changes are adapting to notices that have been released over the last year or so. So they are things that were communicated previously in notices that are now being updated and incorporated into the grants policy statement. And I did want to highlight that NSF and NCSES recently published the 2021 Women, Minorities, and Persons with Disabilities in Science and Engineering report. There's a great executive summary that highlights a lot of the data there, and I would encourage you to go check it out. Next slide, thanks. So a few updates from our office locally. We have recently refreshed our mission, vision, values. And I've got an update on the deadline policy and some other changes coming up. Next slide. So to begin with, our office has been going through a extensive exercise on strategic planning recently. And to start that out, we wanted to do a refresh of our values, mission, vision, and purpose statement or motivation statement. And so this word cloud represents the conversation we had around the values that ORSP as a team feels that it holds highest. Next slide. So we narrowed that down and we came up with our core 5 values of balance, respect, integrity, teamwork, and excellence. Several of these were on our previous values list, but we really wanted to get it down to a bite-sized list where it could express our core values as a team. Next slide. Our new mission statement, which was just finalized, we safeguard and advance U of M's research enterprise by providing our partners with effective and efficient pre-award and non-financial post-award services for the compliant administration of externally sponsored grants, contracts, and ancillary agreements. Next slide. Our updated vision. We aspire to be recognized within U of M and across the globe as the leading provider of authoritative, innovative, and high-value guidance on conduct of sponsored research and other funded activities. Next, our new motivation updated. We are motivated by the transformative research outcomes we enable, the positive role we play in sustaining U of M's reputation for excellence, and the knowledge that our efforts are helping to create a better world and a more promising future. So with those updates, we really wanted to get at the service our office is providing to the institution and the function that we play. And we are hoping that these clarify some of those values and expectations around our role within the institution. So next up, we have some award acceptance request changes that are going to be coming in the May 24th update in ERPM. There are 3 new award acceptance request types that are going to be added into the system. The first is foreign currency with typical in parentheses. So previously we did have a foreign currency AAR type. This will be an additional AAR type. The reason for adding this in is to have a different routing for approvals on the typical ones. These are foreign currencies that the institution has decided don't need one-off approvals from Treasury because we have identified certain countries as having a lower risk, or we've decided to, as an institution, accept the risk. So now we are just looking for the administrative home department to approve and accept the risk if, for example, the value of the dollar compared to that currency is reduced at some point during the project period, there's the potential for the home department to lose some of their expenses because the overall cap of the contract is in that foreign currency. So when we go to actually bill the sponsor, we might not be able to recover all of our expenses because of that exchange rate changing. So when those route, it's no longer going to Treasury, but it is still requiring your approval to accept that risk. The second addition is alternative dispute resolution or arbitration. And this typically was being routed either with governing law or as an other type of AAR. So it's not new that we are asking for permission on this, but it is new that we are designating a specific type for this so that we can track how often we are actually requesting approvals for these. So in this case, you would, as the administrative home department, be approving that you are willing to accept mandatory or binding arbitration or alternative dispute resolution, and that you will agree to the decision made by the arbiter if there is a dispute that goes to arbitration. The last new addition is reimbursement risk and final financial report. So this would be routed in cases where the sponsor is insisting on the final financial report and invoicing being done in less than 45 days after the end of the project. The risk there is that not all of your expenses have hit the project account yet. And so any expenses that are appearing on the project account after the final invoicing may not be reimbursed. So we want to make sure that the administrative home department is ready to accept that financial risk before we accept that term. Next slide. So this is just a screenshot really quickly of what you would see in ERPM for these new AAR types. Just a quick deadline policy update. Next slide. So wanted to show the data. This is pulled May 6th. So You can see the trends on the at-risk proposals are kind of holding steady around 15, 16%, 13% in February. So we are hoping to continue to push that rate down. Our goal is 10%. So we're looking to you to help us to get that rate down closer to the 10%. Unfortunately, it seems to have plateaued. So whatever you can do to kind of help push that forward and get the at-risk proposals down would be a tremendous help to our office, because it does create a lot of last-minute anxiety and a lot of risk that proposals won't get submitted. The more we have coming in at risk, the more likely it is some of them are not going to go in. So getting that down is important to the institution. Next slide. A few updates and reminders. So the award change request automation is under development. There's a team working on that and it is moving forward. We do have some anticipated workload reassignments coming up. Really great news. We've got some babies on the way, some parental leaves coming up, but that does mean that we have to shift workloads around during those absences. So you will be seeing some shifts coming very soon. We are also hiring right now. We have an opening on our DUA team, our data use agreement team. So there is a posting out there. We're looking for a candidate who has some experience in that area and hoping to fill that position quickly. And just a quick reminder on ORSP's response time goals. We do have those published on our website. And when you're setting target dates for things that don't have a hard deadline, please keep those response time goals in mind when you're setting those expectations on turnaround. And that is it. I will hand it over to Debbie Talley for the sponsored programs update. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrea, and good afternoon, everyone. Like Craig said, it's great to have so many of you joining us today. Too bad that we can't actually see you, but it looks like we have almost 300 people joining us today. So couple updates. First off, I just wanted to share that back in April, NIH published a notice really focusing on submitting our final FSRs and requesting final payment from them within that 120 days. And they're not really alone in that. Other agencies are jumping on that same process. So please help us get the financial status reports submitted on time so that we can make sure that the university is paid for the expenses that were incurred. Next slide. So I just wanted to say a thank you. With your help, we actually have inactivated 1,600 projects since, or project grants since January. We do have another 1,200 that we're still working on to get closed out. And of those, there's 500 that are actually late. So those 500 worry me because there are charges on there that need to be addressed. And we run the risk of not being able to be reimbursed for those if they're appropriate to another project. So please help us get those closed out. And if you need some help with the process, there's some resources available. Just as a reminder, the financial status report resources, the FSR overview is on my link, as well as uniform guidance. The introduction to uniform guidance principles is also on my link. So when these slides are available, those links will be ready for you. A couple updates on our audits. I think I've talked about these at the last, this will be the third RAN meeting maybe that I've talked about the NSF audit, which was really for NSF to determine how Michigan handled all the different resources available in regards to the pandemic. And we are at the point now where we're waiting to get the draft report from them on whatever information they found from our audit. And then with the single audit, it's due by June 30th, and we're expecting to get that in sometime in the next few weeks. So coming soon, I have some exciting news to share. So For those of you who request new sub-project grants, we have an e-form that's going to be available very soon. This is something that we've been working with ITS to actually create, and we're expecting that it's going to save time. There's an ability to track the progress in workflow, and there's some additional fields. And when it's ready to use, there will be a wrap or rapid announcement coming out for that. So you should be seeing that soon. And just to share kind of a sneak preview, the next slide shows the before. This is what you're accustomed to when you fill out a sub-PG form. And the next slide is what it will look like in the future with the e-form. And it has a couple new fields on there as well. So hopefully that's going to be really helpful to all of you. Just to give you some statistics, the new sub process, we actually get about 900 requests per year, and that's to create about 1,500 new sub projects per year. So it's pretty big volume. So we're hoping that this will help with the process. Next slide. We have some new staff, and this might be the first time we've actually shared pictures, but we thought it would be nice for you to see some of our new staff. So we have 4 new people actually in our uniform guidance area. Fariha is the person on the upper left, Michael Holtz on the upper right. Judy Jones chose not to share her photo, and then Natalie is on the lower right. So these are the people that you'll be working with when you are resolving your uniform guidance issues. Next slide. And that was so quick. I think I gave you back some time, but if you have any questions, please let me know. I don't believe there's any in the chat for me, but if there's questions following this, please feel free to reach out. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Carolyn Pappas for an ITS update.
Great, thanks very much, Debbie. Good afternoon, all. I have a couple of e-research proposal management updates for you today. And I'm gonna start by telling you that our next release is coming up this Monday, May 24th. And I'm gonna go through a few slides and give you some details of what's in that release. I also want to point out that we are switching our efforts to working on automating the award change request, or the PACR form, as you may know it today. And I am being purposely vague here. We don't have a specific date yet. We are still working with design groups, but the estimate is sometime in the fall of 2021. So look for updates on that. Let me go through a few things on what may be of interest to you coming up on Monday. We are making some changes to the path view finalized for submission to sponsor. We have clarified some language on the awards and mods for ones that ORSP have marked as multiple principal investigator. We've made some changes, as Andrea already pointed out, for the AARs, for the award acceptance requests. And then we have a couple of changes on the UFAs, and I will have some slides here in a second. So let's talk about the finalized for submission to sponsor. This is the view that you can fill out as part of the PAF worksheet, or if you're not final, you fill it out outside of the PAF under the manage data section. And this is the one that we have added some tweaks. We call these usability tweaks. We've had lots of help desk questions on, as you can see, this form, there's a lot going on. So let me go through some of the changes we made, and we hope they're for the better. So the question for finalized used to be on the top of the page, and we moved it to the bottom so it's closer to the document uploader. So you'll see it there on the bottom. Are all of your documents uploaded, and are you ready to finalize? When you first open this up, it starts as no. The other thing we've done is we've increased the font size to kind of bring your attention to that question. We've made some formatting changes on the bottom, so the checkbox, and hopefully you can find things a little better. And then probably the biggest change we made was if you go to this page and you leave it as answered no, you're going to get a pop-up, and Chris is kindly pointing to the box there, that asks you, are you sure you want to leave this page without finalizing? Because it is possible to leave it and finalize and actually not finalize and have your path, if it's in a waiting final proposal, not move to ORSP. So this is just an added check. If you answer the question yes to finalize, you will not see the pop-up box. The other change is ORSP checks paths that are indicated for multiple principal investigators. And this is really dependent on the sponsor guidelines and sponsor requirements. So we have clarified the workspace message that appears on the award and the mod. And you can see it there. Instead of saying multiple principal investigator, it gives you a little more information. And it tells you that the sponsor requires all PIs to approve requested changes. We thought this was important to introduce now because this is going to play a role in the award change request project. Chris, if you could pop ahead to one more page. Thank you. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the unfunded agreements. Specifically on the outgoing material transfer agreements, we have added a new question and we've clarified a question. So the clarified question is to include data, equipment, or software if you answer yes or no to material leaving the country, just to expand the list of what material means. Then the other question has to do with shipping, export control materials, data, equipment, or software, even if it's within the US. So answering yes to either one of these requires you to provide either a country in the first case or an additional explanation if you answer yes or unsure to shipping, export control materials. And this really gives our export control office a way to see that you've answered yes to this and reach out for more information. And that is my update for today. If anyone has any quick questions, I can certainly answer them in the chat. Otherwise, Heather, it's back to you for some closing remarks.
Thanks, Carolyn. I want to thank all the presenters today and in the RAN communications group for putting together such a full panel for our time today, and especially Cheryl, Jim, Barb, thank you for bringing us up to date on the effort certification process, and Zena for talking through the DEI questionnaire and kind of the results that you found. It was really interesting to listen to. And thanks to Craig for bringing our latest NIH confusion factor that will have more spill out over the next couple of months. I do think when we talk about effort, that there's a ton of topics we didn't even hit the tip of the iceberg. I know that one of the questions that came in from the meeting was, how does someone calculate a U-year salary to put in the U-year effort and salary to put on a proposal? And that in itself could be a whole nother hour. So I think one of the things I'm going to leave as a parting thought is that use your colleagues, use your network, talk to the folks in the units that support those folks, because they're going to know exactly how to handle them on a day-to-day basis. I will tell you, speaking as someone who has calendar years, I find the U-year mystifying. And I know that the question came from someone who deals with calendar months. So I do think understanding that we have different appointments, but we all have 100% effort is very important. So do use your colleagues in your network. And I'm excited to say, if Chris, you could post to the comments section, the communications group also worked on putting together an effort resources document. And you can find that in the chat and click on that to go to the Google Drive. It will also have it sent out after the meeting. But it has the same resources that were in the effort certification presentation, a quick access to the chart that they showed about the effort certification timelines. But it also has some links in there that you might find helpful to listen, like the Navigate course has a couple of modules on effort certification and effort reporting. That might be something that following this meeting you'd like to go through and take that module through MyLink and kind of test your knowledge. There's a couple of video presentations. If you're like, what did she say about that? You know, watch those videos and see what the questions are. And I can tell you that I'm going to speak on behalf of all the panelists that I'm sure that they're all happy to take questions. So please do reach out and ask questions of them. So I think Kathy, oh, I know, I promised Kathy as she comes back on video to take over. I was going to be a bit of a rabble rouser today, which is, like I mentioned, with the communications group survey, there were about 15 different topics that came back related to effort. And the highest one, of course, was the compliance issues related to effort. So this way we did the look at the certification process. But knowing that there are so many topics out there, we would encourage, we think that maybe there should be a call to have an effort summit to kind of talk through, even if it's, you know, a section of time on each of the topics. So I don't know, talk to your local RAN folks to say, hey, I want to see an effort summit happen. And I bet that that is something that could happen. So I'm just causing a little trouble. So with that, Kathy, I think I'm ready to turn it back to you because I know that you've got a couple more topics related to the professional development update.
Perfect. Thank you, Heather. Chris, can we have the next slide? So we do have some Navigate and professional development. There was a slide at the beginning, or set of slides, and we will share those out on the RA forum. Here are some highlights. Check out Navigate, and Cora is doing a combined virtual and in-person session. Sorry. In August is their annual meeting. The Nordic conference just happened in May, and the materials are available on their website. And SRAI has a survey out right now. The Michigan chapter is looking for your input. Respond to the survey today. And the annual meeting will be in person in New Orleans this fall. So before we let you go, we have one more quick poll. We want to know how we did today, and we also need your input as we look forward to the fall. So we're going to put up a brief, I think it's only 2-question poll. Here it is. Pick one response per each, and we will give you a few moments to do that.
Kathy, while they're filling out the poll, I just want to take a second and say thank you to the RAN Communications Group for inviting me to come. I feel really honored and privileged to be here, and it was great getting ready for this meeting with you. I think your leadership, I think out of everyone in the meeting, you're the only one who didn't get introduced. So Kathy, I just want to say that thanks so much for the work you're doing and leading that communications group as their chair. So thank you.
Thank you. So we do have some results, and it looks like we did pretty well on meeting some needs today with our content. So thank you. Looks like we're expecting to have some sort of blend of hybrid across the board, and we're still not sure how we feel about doing it in person in the fall. So thank you. That's really going to be helpful for us as we move toward planning. Chris, I think we have one more slide. So last, I want to extend my thanks and appreciation to our MC, to all of the presenters, to the communications subcommittee for putting together the program, and most of all, to you for being with us today. Keep in touch on the forum. We're over 250 members strong, and that's a lot of collective wisdom and support. If you have ideas, suggestions, or other feedback for us, please let us know. Email is ran-plans@umich.edu. And the final RAN of the year is October 28th. Please save the date. Take care and stay well. Thanks.
People